Invincible is one of the most compelling television series I have ever seen. Its ability to weave what can be genuinely gruesome action in with some serious, reflective personal drama has always been my favorite part about it. The characters are great, the story is great, the tone is great, the tension is great, so why does it seem like everybody hates it? I think Invincible is absolutely incredible, but for some reason, if you spend any time watching content about Invincible, you'll very quickly notice a trend in the kinds of videos your algorithm will serve you. The problem with Invincible fans, you deserve better. Invincible's animation is worse than ever. I could go on, but you understand what I'm saying. It feels like every day there's another video tearing this show to pieces, talking about bad animation, bad writing, filler content. In a lot of ways, it feels like this criticism is endless. If all you had seen from Invincible was the discourse about it, I'd totally forgive you if you came away thinking that this was one of the worst shows ever made. But it's just not true, is it? And that's the fundamental problem that I wanted to address in this video. For a show that as an overall package just exudes quality, it truly is greater than the sum of its parts. The way that people talk about it is so needlessly toxic, especially when you consider the constraints that the teams working on it are under. There's just this endless churn of the same talking points over and over in regards to the animation, with little to no understanding of why the show looks the way that it does, and why just making the animation better wouldn't fundamentally improve what the show is trying to accomplish in any real and meaningful way. There's so much nitpicking about things like power scaling, so much frame-by-frame analysis of fast-moving scenes, and to be honest, it seems like people will do anything except watch the fucking show. I think this has gone so far that the community has completely lost sight of reality here, and the truth is, Invincible's pretty fucking good. And in this video, I'm going to make the case for why the intense criticism that the show receives is, in my opinion, extremely over the top and in a lot of cases bordering on absolute absurdity. And I think it's necessary because... Sorry. Invincible has a discourse problem. When Invincible first released back in 2021, it was a time where superhero media had never felt more stale. It felt like Marvel films had completely oversaturated the market, which left a lot of people, myself included, completely indifferent to the genre following the release of Avengers Endgame in 2019. I'll never forget the time I watched the pilot of Invincible, what seemed like nothing more than a cheesy coming-of-age story about a teenager developing superpowers with a knockoff Justice League and how it held its cards close until its post-credits scene. You all know what happens. Omni-Man brutally kills the Guardians of the Globe, and we're left wondering for the whole season, why would he do this? It's that framework that Invincible is built on. Characters that you might assume would be central to the plot from the very first episode are completely stamped out and in the most gratuitous way possible. It works really hard to subvert these tired genre tropes by giving the show genuine stakes and by giving you a reason to care about its characters. Its first season was so strong that I said back then it was by far the best thing I had watched all year, and I still stand by that statement today. Season 1 was incredible, with one of the best finales of any show I've seen, but even with that quality back in 2021, I would argue that the show is consistently getting better over time. And that is primarily due to its writing and character development, which is best in class in my opinion. To be completely honest, Season 4 might genuinely be my favorite season of television ever, and I know that that statement alone is going to rustle a few jimmies. For some reason, people love to complain about Invincible. Practically every single aspect comes under some intense scrutiny at one point or another, but I would say that the primary focus of the majority of these complaints rests on the animation. Look, it's not a secret that Invincible is not the greatest looking show of all time. A lot of the scenes are quite static, in some instances the lighting can be a bit flat, and its artists definitely operate under strict time constraints with its release cadence, it's true. I'm not so naive as to deny that. But you know what else is true? It literally doesn't fucking matter. Not even the tiniest little bit. I've seen so many people say that the quality of the animation is so distractingly terrible that they can't focus on anything else. I've seen videos of people fixing the animation, and don't worry, I'm going to talk about those compositing videos. And I've seen people say that if they just hired Mappa or something, the show would magically be better. Here's the thing though. All of these complaints seem to misunderstand the actual purpose of animation in the context of a show like this. It's not as simple as slapping Demon Slayer's animation style over the story of Invincible and calling it a day. The two styles are operating under fundamentally different principles. From what I've seen of shows similar to Demon Slayer, the action sequences can be especially over the top, but with that energy comes what's almost this sense of playfulness that exists in media like it. This isn't exclusive to animation either. So many action sequences in movies like John Wick have this bombastic nature to them. It feels almost fun in a way that contrasts with the extreme violence that's taking place. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's communicating something fundamentally different than something like Invincible. The action sequences in these shows are hyper choreographed like a dance. They're a performance designed to entertain. They don't have stakes in the same way because they don't need them. They're designed to be fun to watch. Contrast this with Omni-Man fighting the Guardians of the Globe at the end of the first episode. There's nothing fun about this at all. It's over-the-top, gratuitous violence, and it understands this through and through. There's a tension to this scene that goes above and beyond most fight scenes in animated media because you immediately understand the gravity of the situation that the characters have found themselves in. It's gross and it's uncomfortable, and crucially, it doesn't have that irony or playful nature that's inherent with the particularly flashy art style of a lot of Japanese animation. It's a fight scene, sure, but if you watch closely, most of the shots are actually close-ups of characters' faces and their reaction to what's taking place, and that's true of a lot of the super consequential fight sequences in the show. Invincible isn't about the spectacle, it's fundamentally about the characters and their relationship to one another, and if you think about this for more than 2 seconds, it's obvious that that is the case. Again, another example. Let's look at Mark's fight with Conquest at the end of Season 3. There is some spectacle here, but it's entirely in service to the drama and tension. It's to show a level of devastation rather than to be fun. And again, their fight specifically is almost entirely character focused. The shots linger on their faces, the focus isn't on the movement. The violence on display is about the viscerality, and it says something about the characters themselves. The clashing of these two speaks so much more to their own willpower. It isn't hype like a Jujutsu Kaisen fight. The fight is almost scary because you know from everything that's come before, when push comes to shove, it's gloves off for these characters. So when our boy Oliver shows up, big ass beatdown coming up, you aren't relieved, you are terrified of what's to come. Notice how the actual animation quality just barely plays a role here. The show is able to develop this tension, and the animation assists in that, but it isn't the focus. It exists in service of the writing and not the other way around. Yet for some reason, you'll still see video after video with millions of views freeze framing certain shots or taking fast moving objects and slowing them down to assess the animation quality. The one scene I've seen more than anything on TikTok is the part where Oliver's fighting Mr. Liu's dragon in Season 4, and the segment that's been ripped to shreds over and over lasts for literally 1 second, and you wouldn't notice it unless your eyes are glued to the screen specifically looking for animation flaws. I've never seen another show face this level of scrutiny, especially when you can do the exact same thing on any individual scene from another series and notice inconsistencies. The scenes are designed to be watched at speed. No sane person is pausing every individual frame to point out flaws in the animation. It's actually ridiculous. This isn't to mention the swathes of people reposting this video of someone improving the art style of Invincible with compositing, but instead making the most inconsistently lit, over-dramatized shots that have no concern for continuity or tone, shining a massive spotlight on every character from angles that don't make sense isn't an improvement. And let's not even talk about the frame interpolation errors from whatever AI model this was generated with. Yeah, I saw that. Like, some of these shots actually just look bad in comparison to the original, yet they garner consistent praise in their comment sections because people are so brain broken by this constant negative discourse. Apart from the first season of the show, which was made by an entirely different studio, Invincible does maintain a pretty consistent art style throughout its most recent seasons. As I said, it's in no means the best looking show on the market, but it absolutely doesn't have to be when it maintains an astonishingly high quality bar for the aspects that it does focus on, being the writing and characters, with not just some of the best episodes of animated media being produced, but in my mind, especially season 4 containing some of the best episodes of television ever made, period. With such excellently produced content, with absolutely stunning character work and immaculate tension, I don't see a world in which fixing the animation makes these episodes better, but I will get back to that later. I think season 4 has probably the strongest writing in the whole show, coming to terms with everything set up before it, with some genuinely shocking revelations that have changed the course of the show for the future, but it's also been the season to receive the brunt of this incessant nitpicking that gets worse year after year. So why has this season been especially singled out? I would point to two main things, that being episode 4 and the finale, both of which don't conform to typical conventions in different ways. Episode 4 marks a departure from the series' typical structure, introducing a B-plot that was not in the comics, involving Damien Darkblood reverse exercising Mark to hell to restore Satan to his full power to fight yet another world-ending threat. And look, when it comes to criticisms of this episode, I actually tend to agree with a fair few of them. It's a lot slower than the 3 episodes before it, and there are definitely some shots that drag, like when Mark and Damien are falling into the pit, but to be honest, I thought the helmet joke was pretty funny, so I will forgive it. While the main plot of this episode, at least at this point, doesn't really tie back into the main narrative, the character development that Mark goes through definitely allows for this greater nuance towards his mental state going forward, and I personally think that it makes the end of the season hit a little bit harder. Look, I'm not going to discount how people feel about this episode. It is filler in the traditional sense of the word, and would I have preferred something a touch more consequential? Sure, but the internal arc that Mark goes on is important, and the plot involving Darkblood will have some ramifications going forward. But if we're being honest here, the show has had an episode less consequential to the overall plot in every single season. They do serve a purpose, and that is to flesh out the world outside of the Viltrumites themselves. They are the most powerful narrative device in the show, but to allow other characters the space to breathe is equally as important. And as we know, characters introduced seemingly inconsequentially can have huge impacts on the plot later on, the most obvious being Battle Beast. But yeah, as I said, the most important part of the episode is that internal conflict Mark has. But to me, the slower pacing only works to serve the absolute peak that was the 3-episode sprint to follow. Back to back to back, these episodes are gripping from start to finish, and they play to every fundamental pillar of what makes Invincible great. You have incredible character drama, you have genuinely nerve-wracking fight sequences, and one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen, and I'm not talking about protein tubes with that white sauce. And you've got episode 7. Man, this is now the highest rated episode of the series if I remember correctly, and it serves a combination of some of the most tension-ridden fight sequences mixed with genuinely jaw-dropping moments and revelations, grappling with the consequences of the entire show before it. And then we have the elephant in the room. Episode 8 was surprisingly low-key for an Invincible finale, but I think following the string of absolute bangers before it, it did work perfectly for me. It really grapples with the consequences of such an impactful season, with the eventual reveal that the Viltrumites wish to use Earth as a breeding ground to bolster their numbers, and Mark being forced to agree to Thrag's ultimatum being one of the highlights of the whole series. But still, despite such an incredible season of television, while it was airing, I feel like people were pre-positioning themselves to hate it, especially in regards to Thrag. Seriously, remember that stand ready for my arrival worm scene in season 3 where everyone ripped Jeffrey Dean Morgan's performance to shreds over one line, only to be completely proven wrong just 1 week later in the following episode? Well, I got deja vu following the discourse around this one because the exact same thing happened in regards to Lee Pace's portrayal as Thrag. People were making genuine apology videos for how much they dogged on him after episode 6, with Thrag eventually being one of the most formidable villains the show has ever seen, even after a particularly gut-wrenching spaghetti rematch between Mark and Conquest. Point being, it seems like people were sitting in wait, just praying for season 4 to somehow be terrible despite the show's stellar track record. And it was clear throughout it that the people that were going to be most critical of it were ready to jump on any and all perceived misstep without considering the implications to the overall narrative, despite that aforementioned track record showing that the series is pretty aware of what it's doing. And in the aftermath, despite another great season finale, you still have people on the internet calling the episode boring and complaining about the supposed agenda-pushing boogeyman because of a plot beat that is directly adapted from a comic from 15 years ago. It's clear that no matter the quality, no matter how good the season was, people were just gonna hate on it, because I guess that's just what happens with Invincible at this point. Ugh. I mentioned before how it's unlikely that better animation would actually fundamentally change the show without some severe changes to its structure and storytelling. Let me explain what I mean by that. I typically talk about video games on this channel, so I'm going to use a video game analogy. I promise this will make sense for those that aren't as into it. Tears of the Kingdom was my favorite game from 2023, and practically every part that mattered was so jaw-droppingly spectacular. The world was so incredible and richly detailed that it felt like a living, breathing space. Its sandbox was so sophisticated, allowing you to piece together literal machines from scrap you'd find throughout the world. If you wanted to make something, where there's a will, there's a way. There are so many elements of that game that are absolutely best in class. However, the combat, which you do engage with a fair bit, it's just okay. Now, the fundamental question I want to ask is that if almost every element of something is so awe-inspiring, written to near perfection, and immaculately put together, and one element is just okay, how does that affect your overall view of it? When games or movies get rated 10 out of 10, does that mean they must be perfect in every aspect, or is it suggesting something else? And here's the kicker. I think that depending on who you are, this question is going to have a fundamentally different answer. I guess some people just demand perfection from every aspect of the media they consume. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think they're ever going to be truly happy with anything, but I digress. When I think of Invincible, what's on my mind are the things that it does exceptionally well. I'm going to be beating a dead horse here, but its characters feel so well realized and genuinely evolve over the course of the show. There are so many instances of characters really coming into their own over the course of a couple of seasons, like Rex and Oliver, not even mentioning Mark, who in a lot of ways feels like a fundamentally different person after the life-changing horrors the show puts him through. The universe it sets up is rich and vast, with a whole galaxy's worth of interconnected stories that have genuine stakes and consequences, with cause and effect playing massive roles here. There is a massive variety of potential plot points here: the coalition of planets, the Viltrumites, Earth's very own supervillains, to the much more impactful interpersonal drama of Mark and his family. The show has this incredible ability to generate tension, with episodes that absolutely lock you to the screen from start to finish, many of them being in season 4, leaving you dumbfounded by the implication of its biggest reveals, and again, the quiet contemplation that can come after. You fear for the characters because you know that they're not safe in the same way that characters in a Marvel film are, as the show has demonstrated time and time again that it will kill off characters or seriously injure them if the plot demands it, and the animation in most instances is just okay. I suspect you get the point here, but I have to wonder how the discourse for a show can be so filled to the brim with toxicity, all the while many of you, like myself, watch Invincible and see outstanding quality in almost every single aspect of it. How can episode 7 of season 4 have a 9.9 rating on IMDb, one of the highest user ratings of any episode of any show, and you can still find people ripping aspects of it to shreds on Reddit and YouTube? The showrunners can do practically every single thing right, with that episode ironically having really good animation, and people will still bitch and moan about power scaling or the tech jacket gender swap. It's just insane to me that something that is gushing with this level of quality gets this amount of flack. I'm going to be honest here, practically every single issue that gets repeated on Blast, to me, reads as little more than outrage farming, especially the animation, because as with something like Tears of the Kingdom, something can be so strong in other areas that its deficits just do not matter anymore, a point which is seemingly impossible to reconcile for some. The animation being somewhat unsophisticated in comparison to the rest of the package just absolutely does not matter in the slightest, because it's carried to Viltrum and back by the strength of its characters, its outstanding use of tension, and the tender moments in between. I get one absolute copium take for the video, so here it is. I would go so far as to say that changing the animation style to something along the lines of what these people suggest, like Jujutsu Kaisen or Demon Slayer, would serve only to distract from what actually matters, which is intense character drama that permeates even the action sequences. Yes, I'm saying that making the animation better would probably only serve to harm what the show does best. Yes, I told you it was copium. And I think that's a good point to start wrapping up on. Let's bring this one home. Look, regardless of what you think specifically about Invincible and its animation or power scaling or Amber or whatever, it still exists as one of the highest rated shows across multiple aggregate sites, so it's clear they're doing something right. If it wasn't obvious, I am definitely in the camp that thinks that rating is well earned, especially with its most recent season delivering one of the most gripping narratives that left me patiently waiting by my TV like a dog every Wednesday. If there are no Invincible fans, I'm dead type shit. And if you're like me, which I suspect at least a few of you are if you haven't clicked off this video yet, I'm sure it feels at least a little disheartening to see a show of this quality get torn to shreds over every minute detail. But as is the case with algorithm-based media, people gotta have something to be mad about. Just know, I see you. I always wonder how things like this happen, how something can become the recipient of such vitriol over something like just okay animation quality when it's clearly not the focus of the show in the same way as its characters and story, which are undoubtedly incredible. So much so that they completely overshadow any other issue that I might have had with it. And it's in that I hope this video was able to be at least somewhat of a counter to this intense toxicity that's formed around this very special piece of superhero media, the one that got me interested in the medium after my falling out with Marvel all those years ago. So, tell me what you think in the comments. Am I a massive chud idiot for not being bothered by Invincible's animation quality? I'm sure at least a few of you think that. And in that, I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.